Hi everybody. Welcome to the Congregational Church of Littleton's Facebook page. No matter who you are or where you are in life's journey, you are welcome here. So, Wondering Wednesday. Sorry, this week I needed to pre-record. I have a meeting at the time we usually do it live. So, I did not want to miss it, so I thought this would be a great way to do it. So, as usual, our reading is from the Jesus Storybook Bible. And this time we are reading God's Messenger. Jonah and the Big Fish, from Jonah 1 through 4, and Hebrews 1 verses 1 through 12. 1 through 2, sorry. I have to be able to read that. God had a job for Jonah, but Jonah didn't want it. Go to Nineveh, God said, and tell your worst enemies that I love them. No, said Jonah. Those are bad people doing bad things. Exactly, said God. They have run far away from me, but I can't stop loving them. I will give them a new start. I will forgive them. No, said Jonah. They don't deserve it. I'll run away, Jonah said to himself. Far away, so far away that God won't be able to find me. Then I won't have to do what God says. It's a good plan, he said, because as far as he knew, it was a good plan. But of course it wasn't. It wasn't a good plan at all. It was a silly plan, because you can't run away from God. But he will always come and find you. You can run away, but he'll always find you. Jonah went ahead with his not very good plan. One ticket to not Nineveh, please, he said, and boarded a boat sailing to the very opposite direction of Nineveh. Well, it wasn't long before a fierce wind blew and the boat started to lurch and pitch and roll, and everyone started turning green. Jonah sat bolt upright in his bed. You see, the first thing that went wrong with Jonah's not very good plan was that God sent a big storm after him. The sailors couldn't sail their ship properly. We're sinking, they screamed and started throwing everything overboard. Suitcases, food, whatever they could find. But now Jonah knew that the storm was his fault. Throw me in instead, he shouted to the sailors, and the storm will stop. The sailors weren't sure. It's the only way you can be saved, Jonah cried. And so, 1, 2, 3, splash! No sooner had Jonah hit the water than the waves grew calm, and wind died down, and the storm stopped. Just then, when Jonah thought it was all over, when he was sure he was going to drown, God sent a big fish to rescue him. The fish swallowed Jonah whole with one big gulp. Oh boy. Jonah must have thought he died. It was so dark in there, like a tomb. But then he smelled the rotting food and felt the slimy seaweed and knew he wasn't dead. He was in the belly of the fish. Sitting there in the darkness for 3 whole days, Jonah had plenty of time to think. Pretty soon he realized his plan was, well, a very silly plan indeed. He was sorry for running away. He prayed to God from inside the great fish and asked God to forgive him. After 3 days, the fish spat Jonah safely out onto the sandy beach. Just then, Jonah heard someone calling his name. Go to Nineveh, God said. And this time, Jonah said yes. He went straight to Nineveh and told everyone God's wonderful message. Even though you've run far from me, he can't stop loving you, Jonah told them. Run to him so he can forgive you. The people of Nineveh listened to Jonah, and they started loving God. They learned to do what God said and to stop running away from him, just like Jonah. Many years later, God was going to send another messenger with the same wonderful message. Like Jonah, he would spend 3 days in utter darkness. But this messenger would be God's own son. He would be called the Word, because he himself would be God's message translated into our own language. Everything God wanted to say to the whole world in a person. That is the end of our story. Wow. Listen to that. So how? Let's go back to the beginning, right? Here's Jonah. God's telling him, go to Nineveh. Tell your enemies I love them. And he's like, are you crazy? How do you think Jonah felt about that? Right? Because he was like, I wonder what he was feeling inside, what his heart felt when he was asked to do something that he really didn't want to do. I wonder how you feel sometimes when your mom or your dad asks you to do something that you really don't want to do. You know, maybe you have to, your parents ask you to speak up in class and talk to your teacher over your Zoom classes or when you're back in person sometime again to find out how to do the work, what you need, and ask for help, right? Or maybe they're asking you to do something at home that you don't really want to do. I wonder how you feel about that and what you do about that. In this story, Jonah runs away, right? He felt he could. Instead of facing, right, because facing that fear of what's ahead of him, he ran away. And he's on this boat that's rocking and everybody's getting sick. And I started thinking about the people, other people on that boat. How are those people feeling during that storm? How do they feel when Jonah stood up and said, "This storm is because of me. Throw me overboard"? They did throw him over, but I wonder how they felt about that. What they were feeling inside. What they were thinking about afterwards when the storm stopped and the boat was still. Take a minute to think about how that must have felt. And now Jonah's in a big fish. I wonder what he was thinking about, right? Let's think for a minute. If you were in a big fish, still alive, in a belly, and you're sitting there, and you're just thinking, I wonder what's going through your mind. I wonder what was going through Jonah's mind while he was sitting in there. We know that he ended up telling God he'd do what he'd say and asking him to forgive him. And he left the fish. He was spit out of the fish. And he went and he told his enemies. Now, he didn't want to do this in the first place. So let's think for a minute. Now he's deciding, yes, I'm going to do what God asked me to do. But how do you think he was feeling about it? Right? Think a minute about how he felt doing the thing that he didn't want to do, that God had asked him to do. And then once he did it, and he found that the message he had for his enemies and for all of those people turned them back to God, helped them follow God again. How he felt about that. That, wait a minute, my words made a difference. I gave them God's message. A lot to think about in that story. A lot of feelings to figure out how everybody is feeling in it. Right? Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. And I will be back live next week. And I can't wait to see you then to read Get Ready. Ooh, I wonder what that story is going to be about. My bookmark in there. All right, everybody. Have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. See you next time. Bye.